On October 9th, 2025, the first teaser trailer for Pluribus appeared, Vince Gilligan's new prestige TV show. It was set to be released on Apple TV. Its only description of the show was, "The most miserable person on earth must save the world from happiness," a very cryptic summary of what was going on. But what Pluribus actually is about is an alien invasion or a virus,
No, it's not that exactly either.
as the actual Pluribus states. In the first episode, they say they are a psychic glue capable of binding us all together. They are us, the others. More specifically, compared to a familiar trope, they are a hive mind, but structured differently, as their main goal, while trying to lead Carol to the other side, is to actually accommodate everyone left on the planet, acting as a provider, a support system, and even as a friend in order to make the world a better place than it once was. For 9 episodes, Carol has to live and survive in an apocalyptic world where everyone is content with themselves and with the others. I fell in love with this show from the very first episode. It is a deeply complex, sometimes comedic, sometimes emotional, very dark series with many complex themes of loneliness, solitude, love in a hopeless state, grief, and many more that I can list. However, many people do not see it that way, as multiple sources like Forbes, The Ringer, and even The New Yorker proclaim it's about artificial intelligence, how the others are controlling, they hold infinite knowledge, and they act friendly but in many ways hold a manipulative deviance. Some writers like The New Yorker have a problem with this analysis, stating the AI analogy gives way to something much less satisfying, a horror story about what their version of living in harmony would really entail. So why do people hold this truth? And how is it popular among the audience of Pluribus and against more complicated themes? Well, first, let's talk about how Vince Gilligan came up with his show. Vince Gilligan is described as an auteur because of his specific styling when it comes to prestige TV shows. In Relevant magazine, he came up with an idea of creating a hero 10 years ago when he was creating Better Call Saul. That led to the creation of Carol Sturka. Carol has the usual semantics seen in Gilligan's shows of a main character who is undervalued in society and goes to extreme measures to make people understand or to get what they want. They also hold a capacity for self destruction and get into heavy conflicts for their own selfish desires. More importantly, he creates these main characters as an analysis on how a human being can come to these emotions and moral stances, how one can react against a stressful and challenging environment. Because of his broad placement of his ideals and stylization in his work, he has the ability to create a wide range of complexity into his stories. As for his stance on AI, even though he places a little hidden message of "this show is made by humans" at the credits of every episode, he didn't make it as a clear criticism of artificial intelligence in mind. In fact, he does not think about any particular themes when writing the show. His motto is, if you create complex characters that do complicated actions that serve a story, then the messages and themes will come together, either by the natural pace of the events or the audience themselves. So with that being said, there are several interpretations taken into not only Pluribus, but to any show he has created or worked on, which means Pluribus would hold more complexity than a comparison to AI. For disclosure, the AI interpretation is a fair example to use when obeying the show, with the law of moments where the Pluribus hive mind acting like ChatGPT, where they sometimes misunderstand orders. However, that theory lies only in the broader parts of the conversation in the text, and I feel like I want to dive deeper into the complex themes that show harbors into the story world. I believe the discourse has led on to a domineering topic in the world where it dilutes any dystopian artifact into a straw man for the presence of generative AI that sadly dominates the societal space. So let's dive deep into Pluribus and why there is something more that is encoded into the show. The first episode of the show starts with a timer: 439 days, 19 hours, 56 minutes, and 10 seconds. How much time before the world changes forever, when everyone becomes one? Everyone shares the same infinitesimal knowledge of every living human being on Earth, because of a scientific discovery of a like minded virus that infected everyone, except for 13 survivors, and killed 886 million people. Everyone is fine with that except for Carol. By the time that the Pluribus hive mind interacts with her by a phone call and a television screen, she is startled by the sudden change of the world, with the hive mind calmly telling that they just want to make Carol happy. In fact, the first line they say is not one of conquest, but simply, "we just want to help." At the end of the episode, as Carol is anguishing on the couch, the timer starts again at an hour already. It will keep going until the end of the show. This is the new world now that Carol is living in, and even though the hive mind truly cares for Carol's safety and health, Their main goal is still in the air, where they want to convert Carol to a freer bliss, one where she is not bound to the limitations of the world, and be one with everyone's thoughts, feelings, and emotions without any kind of stress or despair. The promise of great everlasting connection is there, but with the erasure of the self as a consequence. Carol feels the same despair as would the rest of us when everyone has mentally disappeared, where everyone has gone their separate ways, leaving with one human consciousness, feeling like you're the only one who hasn't been raptured. Because of this, Carol Sturka has quickly become one of my favorite characters of all time. She displays a sense of anger that is so natural and flowing, a distinct level of annoyance and grief that is so rational yet mean at the same time that it's very exciting to empathize with her and be on her side. In every scene, she tries to command it or fight back, but unfortunately, the Pluribus hive mind has already finished her mission. She has already lost hope, and the hive mind is claiming there still is. Her fussiness is made so reasonable that her lack of expensive comfort or actual need puts the audience into the same boat. She now belongs to a world where everyone is better off without her because they share the same happy, conscious body, so they have nothing to complain about. To me, this represents a forced isolation by socialization. You find something wrong in the world but are labeled as the opposition immediately, as an outlier in a sociology paper. With an average community, everyone shares their own ideas and traits for connection and stability, and with Zoja and the rest, they're of one sound echoing past other possessed people. Not only are there themes of purposeful isolation from a distorted community, but there's also more nuance and specific relatability being made to write Carol as a lesbian, whose wife, as the only one who treats her like an actual person, has disappeared into the moral realm. I think this is genius character writing that gives more weight to the conflicts at hand. It makes Zoja and the rest of the Pluribus implicitly heartless, as they phrase her death as a good thing, and with Carol comparing her motives to a conversion therapy camp. It is demoralizing, not in the artificial sense where the environment is running out, where they're spreading false information, or they're just consistently exploiting humans everywhere, but in the personal sense of killing the self for a lesser minded self. And for Carol, it feels wrong. It feels like she's not engaging with an alien, but more all of humanity being reverted to a primal individualistic state. Moreover, she is screaming at the world to stop turning. She could ask for a therapist or a counselor as they would know about the knowledge of mental health, but Carol doesn't because of the implication that they're trying to fix her. They perceived Carol as the wrong way to live. It's more about everyone's mental state being much better than you to an extreme sense, and when people are becoming better and maintaining the apocalypse of life, it makes people who are not living well and are actually doing pretty horrible a little pissed off. You are asking for stability from someone who controls everything. But with that faulty ideology programmed into the hive mind in mind, there are no real bad guys in the new world they made. AI is evil, the hive mind is not. When Carol said that she has agency and they cannot interfere, they actually respond and step back. They don't use the algorithms of the internet to proclaim knowledge, they literally know everything about everyone and everything. They use the infinite human knowledge of everyone in the world to theirs and everyone else's benefit.
You're gonna need a pickaxe, by the way. There's a lot of volcanic rock in that soil. Your neighbor Martin at 1204 has one in his garage along with the sun hat and...
The hive mind can be described as a friend, a service, a cult, and even a governmental autocracy, but they're not described as artificial. In fact, they leave Carol behind after she drugs Zoja, saying they need a moment. They understand it needs space, which carries consequences as a connector of the entire population. Zoja, as a way to get more personal with Carol, cares about her to an extent, but they're more that friend who says, damn, that sucks, but there's a better path, and only provides basic needs to a human being that needs actual help. But the thing is, near the end, Carol actually loves them and gets into a romantic relationship with Zoja, not because she's losing her mind through deteriorating psychosis, but because they're literally the only people left alive that have the capability to make a connection, whether it's genuine or not. And even though Zoja is indirectly using her, they still treat Carol as a human being, as someone they actually care for. There is realness in their pursuit of connectivity and their understanding with everyone currently alive. They're not using Carol for any manipulative purposes, nor is it controlled by humanity's fault. They can't even lie because they won't be considered friendly or caring. They actually think it's a good idea if you succumb to the conformity of the instant norm, and if the people don't, it's okay, and it will accommodate everything you're doing with if you just ask, but will never understand the brevity of how overwhelming the situation is. For me, this is a representation of suffering from depression or from a mental illness or even being angry that everyone is doing much better than you. Everyone waves hello to you while you flip them off. Gilligan's show requires active audiences to understand, to feel the emotions laced within the show, to feel the weight of despair and isolation felt by Carol. That does not mean that other interpretations are exterminated, more subordinated for a coverage based on context. One can interpret it in an artificial way, but thinking about the characters in the world in this lens doesn't necessarily relate to isolation and depression in a deeper sense. If it is used in a one note realization of what it is, it leaves everything unsatisfied and unfulfilling because the viewer didn't grasp exactly all of the meanings of the show. A storyteller functions to reduce multiple meanings into the story, into the ever expanding culturally significant discourse. But certain proprietaries of culture that influence our morals, like the ever dying capitalism and the technology it withholds, can take a huge veil into the power of discourse, making it the most popular stance on a media series. This is not a problem with the people participating in the discourse, but more the structure of a hegemonic system acting as a support beam. Hegemony, with any major idea, is a feedback loop, where the output of a current system of entertainment or other contexts of life gives audiences their own type of input by violating their beliefs and opinions onto a show. The result is that more of the same topics get strained back into the feedback loop of connectivity. In that way, the audience is more focused on the presence of ChatGPT than the personality of Zoja and the others. As Michael Foucault stated while discussing the nature of discourse, the power of the discourse depends on what is enabled, constrained, and constituted into the ever evolving sphere. Knowledge is used as a weapon by the powers that reign it. And with that truth, there are several different ways that the discourse can be mediatized or controlled to dominant ideologies. Michael Hannon, who talks about discourse in a political sense but shares some similarities with the discussion in the media, examines how there are information shortcuts where people find quicker engagement with the story or the interpretive meaning. It follows the idea of a marketplace of ideas, where instead of it being an arena in which discursive opinions on public matters can develop, it grows into a more corporate and competitive idea of a domain in which we listen to the announcements of like minded individuals and passively receive their opinions. There is a clear and strong domain structured by the LLMs and manipulative technology, and many individuals understand and passively receive it as the dominant idea in the discourse. The AI discourse has invaded the framing of Pluribus because of its broad similarities, but doesn't allow other identities or interpretations to share the same equal space. And I think there should be more room for complexity. When the discourse evolves, it needs to remember to have the capacity to hold more of the audience's agency and activity to engage with the complex media more thoroughly, instead of relying on arbitrary topics that dilute the themes of the show and make it less meaningful than what the show truly carries under its storytelling heart. There was one part in episode 7 that really got to me that I wish people would talk about more, and it's considered the least favorite episode according to IMDb. It is about Carol being alone after Zoja and the others leave her behind to think things through. The scene starts after Carol almost kills herself with a firework that burns down her roof. In this scene, she gets white paint from an empty hardware store and applies it to her road. Then she waits while she stares at a painting she stole. Suddenly, Zoja arrives, still smiling at Carol after everything, and after a few long moments of silence, Carol slowly comes up to Zoja and hugs her, crying in the process, desperately grabbing hold of who or what's left after days of revolt. As we see this, the camera pans to a simple message that she has written. This is the reason why I think Pluribus is not just about AI and why there should be more talks not relating to one specific part of the world, but instead on multiple intricate things that exist in this world. Why there should be more perspectives instead of a revolving and massive topic is because I want to talk to people about what I got from the show. That you have to make some type of empathetic connection with somebody in order to retain some sanity, some survival in order to be alive. I want everyone to feel similar to what I felt when Carol wrote Come Back. Pluribus is not about AI. It's about humans.